right, let's see how we're doing. Post a comment and let me know if you can see this. I think we are going live though. I think I'm just gonna get started and guess that YouTube will do its thing. I am Drew Badger, the founder of EnglishAnyone.com and the English Fluency Guide. And today, in this little episode of Fluent in 15, the whole purpose of this new series is to actually get you fluent in particular things as we focus on them. So you don't really become fluent in the whole language by trying to study everything. You become fluent in pieces of it. And this is why you can probably speak fluently about some things, but maybe not others. So as you improve your fluency in particular things by knowing them really well, by erasing doubt, that's when you start speaking. So what we're going to do today, we're going to focus on this book, and I'm going to give you some naturally varied review. And naturally varied review is different from typical repetition, where we just take something and repeat it, or you hear the same thing again and again. I'm going to read this same story a few different ways, and I'm going to try to keep this under 15 minutes, or at least around that. And then I'm going to do something different, which is I will come back again in another live video a few minutes after this one finishes. So I've never tried this before. We'll see if it works, but I thought I would break this into two different videos. So let's get started. So what I'm going to do first is just tell you, help you understand what's happening in the story just to make it clear, and then I'm going to go back and we'll look at some of the vocabulary, and then we will go through and actually read the story. And I recommend you go back, maybe watch this video 2 or 3 times so you make sure you catch everything. So the basic idea of the story is there is a little mitten right here, and a mitten, if you don't know the difference, a mitten is when we have all the fingers together. A glove is like this. So if you have a mitten, you've got the thumb here and the separate finger, a little area for the hands over here, and then we've got a mitten in this one, so a glove versus a mitten. So I'm going to go through this quickly. I apologize if I'm not answering any comments, but I really want to make sure I get through all of this within 15 minutes if possible. So the mitten. So very interesting story. I'm just going to go through, show you the pictures, and just talk about what's happening the first time we go through it. So I often do this with my own kids as I'm teaching them new vocabulary. So the point of this is I call it like a vocabulary building machine. It's really a way of learning that helps you understand the vocabulary so you get fluent automatically without having to study anything. So here we just have a grandmother with her grandson, and the grandson is asking for a new mitten, but he wants white ones. So he wants a white mitten, and his grandmother says, well, maybe if we make a white mitten for you, or 2 white mittens, you're going to lose them in the snow. But he says, no, I really want to have white mittens. And so of course he goes out, and what does he do? He drops one of his mittens. So he's already lost it. He just got out of his house, maybe like a few feet from his house, and he has already lost the mitten. So he's climbing a tree, and then he forgets where the mitten is. Maybe he's going off. You can see his footprints here. He's continuing to walk, but then something else, I'll zoom in there for you, a little mole finds the mitten. Isn't that interesting? So it's winter here. I think this is supposed to be a Ukrainian story, but you can see obviously it's a very cold place. And this little mole is looking for some place warm, and he finds the mitten, and he climbs inside of it. But next, a rabbit comes, and then the rabbit says, well, I want to get inside that mitten also. And obviously you can probably guess where this story is going, but you see other animals also trying to get inside the mitten. So next we have a hedgehog trying to get in, and if you look at the pictures up here, you can see what's going on kind of next or coming up next in the story. So a hedgehog gets in the mitten, and then an owl comes and gets in the mitten. Oh my goodness. And then a badger. So if you're wondering, like my name, Drew Badger, this is the animal that's from, the badger. All right, so badger also is trying to get in the mitten, and you see they're stretching the mitten out as they continue to try to climb in there, and everybody trying to fit inside this tiny mitten. And of course, the animals get bigger and bigger. Now we have a fox, and you can see the next animal over here, a bear. And so a bear tries to get into the mitten too, and wow, they've really stretched the hell out of this mitten. So to really stretch it a lot, to stretch the hell out of this mitten. And of course, the last little animal, you can see the little footprints over here. It's a little mouse. And the mouse comes and sits on the bear's nose and tickles the bear's nose a little bit, and the bear sneezes and wah-choo, all the animals go flying out, and the mitten goes flying up into the air. And the boy, Nicky is his name, he sees the little mitten falling down and he says, yeah, look at that. I didn't lose my mitten, it's right there. So he catches it and then he goes back home to his grandmother and he says, look, I didn't lose my mitten, but one of them is really stretched out. So that is the story of the mitten, all right? So the first thing, what I'm trying to do is just help you understand the context of the story. So we have a little boy, he wants to have a new mitten or a new set of mittens, and so he asks his grandmother to make them. He loses it. You have different animals that are climbing in. So you understand it's a pretty easy context to understand. You can see the pictures and what's happening. Now I'm going to go through some of the vocabulary for the actual story. I was just telling you what's going on, and now I want to go back through this and make sure you understand what's happening. So here we are again. Again, the point of naturally varied review is not just to repeat something, but to change it a little bit. And each time you go through, you should notice a little bit more and actually discover some things yourself without me giving you translations or explaining things. So here we have the little boy over here, and I'm going to read you the story, but we'll maybe just cover some of the vocabulary as well. Once there was a boy named Nicky. He wanted mittens as white as snow. So that's a common pattern, as white as snow, as big as something else. We're going to compare two things. So as white as snow. But his grandmother says, if you drop a white mitten in the snow, it will be hard to find. Hard to find. So you could say hard to locate or difficult to find, hard to find. His grandmother told him. But Nicky wanted snow white mittens. So there's another way of describing something as really white. So you could say white as snow or snow white mittens. So snow white. Notice there's a little dash in there. So snow white mittens. So much that Baba made them for him. And so when she finished knitting, so to knit the mittens, she has to take the two little sticks and knit the mittens together. When she finished knitting, Nicky put on the mittens and went out to play. So he went outside to play. But it wasn't long before one mitten fell off. All right, so we have something, mitten is on his hand and then it falls off. All right, so there are different ways we could express this. You could say he lost the mitten, or he dropped the mitten, or it came off, it fell off. These are all perfectly fine ways to express this. A little mole found it and crawled inside. So we're talking about the movement, a little mole very close to the ground. He crawled inside. It was just the right size, so he decided to stay. A rabbit came hopping by. So the rabbit came by, or the rabbit came close, but he was hopping, so the rabbit came hopping by. So if you come to visit or someone is visiting you, you can say they came by your house. But in this case, we talk about the movement. We can add the movement of the rabbit, and the rabbit came hopping by. And he wiggled in next to the mole. He wiggled in next to the mole. A hedgehog wanted to get warm. The mole and the rabbit made room for him. So they opened up some space. They made room for the hedgehog. Now, a hedgehog, that's a little bit prickly. He's got some little spines on his back. And here we have, the owl didn't want to be left out. So to leave someone out means to forget someone or to not include someone. So often if we have a party or something, another person or a child or somebody says, well, I want to do that thing too. So the owl didn't want to be left out. They didn't want to leave the owl out. So the mole, the rabbit, and the hedgehog had to move over. So there's another way of expressing that same idea of making room or making space. They had to move over. The little mitten was getting crowded. So now we have more animals filling up the mitten. It was becoming more crowded, getting more crowded. A badger looked out of his house. So look at that. A badger was living in this tree and saw the mitten, and he climbed right in. So he didn't care. He was pretty big, and he just pushed his way inside the mitten. And it started to snow. So now you can see the weather back here getting a little bit darker. It started to snow, so a fox pushed his way in and made himself right at home, right at home. So to make yourself at home means you go into a place and you feel relaxed like it's your own house, to make yourself at home. And this is a common phrase you can say to people if they come visit you at your house. You say, oh, make yourself at home. It's another way of saying, please relax. And then a big bear sniffed. So he sniffed at the mitten and the animals were packed in tight, but the bear didn't care. So he said, well, I don't care if it's tight, if there are a lot of animals in here, I'm getting in here anyway. And he crawled in anyway, and the mitten was getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Then a tiny mouse squeezed in and perched herself on the bear's nose. So to perch, like a you can think about a bird perching, like kind of sitting on top of something. So the little mouse is perching itself right on top of the bear's nose. And then the mouse's whiskers tickled the bear's nose. Achoo! The bear sneezed. All the animals flew out of the mitten. All the animals flew out of the mitten. So you can say flew out or came out or flied out of the mitten. Nicky saw his mitten sail up into the air. So you could say sail up into the air or fly up into the air or go up into the air or float up into the air. There are lots of different ways you could say that. And then from the window, Baba, so you can see his grandmother is over there watching. From the window, Baba watched Nicky catch his mitten. See, Baba, he called to her, I have both my mittens. And Baba smiled. But then, of course, he goes back into the house and sees her, well, one of the mittens has been really stretched out. All right, I'll check comments very quickly before I read this one more time, but hopefully this is making sense. If you're just joining us late, I recommend you go back and watch this again. I'm just making this quick video so you have some review that you can go back and review it a few times to make sure you catch all of the vocabulary. All right, so hopefully everyone is enjoying this. So how do you understand a vocabulary word? I'm actually going to talk about that more in my next video, which I'll be shooting right after this one is finished. So we're going to go back now and actually read. I'm going to read the whole story. And so now that you have some more context, I've explained some of the vocabulary and what it means, I'm going to read the story again. All right, here we go. So The Mitten by Jan Brett. Jan Brett. Once there was a boy named Nicky. He wanted mittens as white as snow. If you drop a white mitten in the snow, it will be hard to find, his grandmother told him. But Nicky wanted snow white mittens so much that Baba made them for him. When she finished knitting, Mickey put on the mittens and went out to play. It wasn't long before one mitten fell off. A little mole found it and crawled inside. It was just the right size, so he decided to stay. A rabbit came hopping by. He wiggled in next to the mole. A hedgehog wanted to get warm. The mole and the rabbit made room for him. The owl didn't want to be left out, so the mole, the rabbit, and the hedgehog had to move over. The little mitten was getting crowded. A badger looked out of his house and saw the mitten. He climbed right in. It started to snow, so a fox pushed his way in and made himself right at home. Then a big bear sniffed at the mitten. The animals were packed in tight, but the bear didn't care. He crawled in anyway. The mitten was getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Then a tiny mouse squeezed in and perched herself on the big bear's nose. The mouse's whiskers tickled the bear's nose. Achoo! The bear sneezed. All the animals flew out of the mitten. Nicky saw his mitten sail up into the air. From the window, Baba watched Nicky catch his mitten. See, Baba, he called to her, I have both my mittens. And Baba smiled. And look at that. All right, we will end the video here, but I will be back in just a few minutes to talk more about building vocabulary, but hopefully you get the idea. The point is to take something and really focus on it. It could be specific vocabulary or understanding how to talk about a particular situation. So you have lots of good physical examples here that you can see, and you can also learn different ways of expressing these. If you'd like to learn more about this, you can click on the links in the description below this video, but I will see you back shortly for the next video today. Bye-bye.